All right, folks, good morning once again. Good morning. I'll just speak to you because you're the only one that responded right here. Let's try that again. Good morning. All right. I'll just move the podium right here. I'll just talk to you. Yeah, you guys are so energetic. Makes me feel awesome because I'm feeding off of your energy. Take a nap in the middle of the sermon. Well, if you're not energized, you will be less energized. By the end of the sermon, you will be less energized. Where do I start? Well, first of all, we're going to cover chapter 11 from verse 1 to verse 20. So let's start right there. And this is one of those passages, sections, that there isn't a good way to cover this in a sermon format. There's only a bad way and a slightly better way than bad, but truly not good. So those are the only two options. Bad and slightly less version of bad. Because there's a lot going on, but very little going on at the same time. There's a lot of information, but very little of it kind of is suitable for a sermon. So you have two options, right? We skip it, or we tackle it and do the best that we can with what we have. And as you know, I never skip anything. So let's do the best that we can with what we have. As I stated before, previously, last couple of weeks, these last few chapters, they're actually just one story. Prior to these last couple of sections that we've covered, every chapter was sort of a story in and of itself. But here from chapter 10 all the way to chapter 12, it's one account. And now it's just continuing to develop and more details are being given. Again, initially in chapter 10, Daniel had this vision. He was distraught, he was upset, and then the angel came to start to not only give him a little bit of cheer and hope, so he wouldn't continue to cry and fast and mope around, but also give him additional insight so he knew exactly what was going to happen, what was to come. So this is just a continuation of what had started in the previous chapter. So here the angel is still talking to Daniel, and now there is a portion where he's going to basically list and describe and tell him about a bunch of things that are going to occur in his future, but also in our past. So try here is we're going to try to match what is stated here with history that has already occurred. Again, to Daniel, when he received this information, it had not occurred yet. But to us, as we read this information, very likely most of these things have already occurred. And we can actually match it into history. So as we go through certain verses here, I will try to pause and mention the things that parallels or connects into history that has already occurred. And as I try to do towards the end, usually, we'll just kind of sum it all up and think of an idea, a principle that we can learn. But first, we actually need to get through the content. Let me read it all the way through, and then we'll go back and discuss it one portion at a time. Again, Daniel chapter 11 from verse 1 to verse 20. Also in the first year of Darius the Mede. Even I, stood up to confirm and strengthen him. And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than all. By his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And when he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken up and divided towards the 4 winds of heaven, but not among his posterity, nor according to his dominion, with which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be uprooted, even for others besides these. Also, the king of the south shall become strong, as well as one of his princes. And he shall gain power over him and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. And at the end of some years, they shall join forces. For the daughter of the king of the south shall go to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of her authority. And neither he nor his authority shall stand, but she shall be given up with those who brought her, and with him who begot her, and with him who strengthened her in all those times. But from a branch of her roots one shall arise in his place, who shall come with an army, enter the fortress of the king of the north, and deal with them and prevail. And he shall also carry their gods captive to Egypt with their princes and their precious articles of silver and gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. Also, the king of the north shall come to the kingdom of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land. However, his sons shall stir up strife and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overwhelm and pass through. Then he shall return to his fortress and stir up strife. Verse 11. And the king of the south shall be moved with rage and go out and fight with him, with the king of the north, who shall muster a great multitude. By the multitude shall be given into the hand of his enemy. When he has taken away the multitude, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cast down tens of thousands, but he will not prevail. For the king of the north will return and muster a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come at the end of some years with a great army and much equipment. Now in those times many shall rise up against the king of the south, also violent men of your people shall exalt themselves in fulfillment of the vision, but they shall fall. So the king of the north shall come and build a siege mound and take fortified city, and forces of the south shall not withstand him. Even his choice troops shall have no strength to resist, but he who comes against him shall do according to his own will, and no one shall stand against him. He shall stand in a glorious land with destruction in his power. He shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do. And he shall give him the daughter of a woman to destroy it, but she shall not stand with him or be for him. After this he shall turn his face and to the coastlands, and shall take many, but a ruler shall bring the reproach against them to an end, and with the reproach removed, he shall turn back on him. Then he shall turn his face towards the fortress of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. There shall arise in his place one who imposes taxes on the glorious kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, but not in anger or in battle. Amen. Do a sermon with that. Go for it. You try it. Think pastors only work on Sundays. You know how much I struggled with this throughout the week? Okay. There's a lot more to come. So I stopped at verse 20 because this is all I could bear, and I'm sure this is all you could bear as well. Here what we have is one of the passages, portions of Scripture that detail the greatest amount of history. Here, basically, we have about 375 years being depicted in a prophetic manner. Now, let's open and close parentheses here for a second. There's one of two ways for you to interpret this in the Bible in general. One way is for you to say, look, this guy named Daniel, we don't even know if his name was Daniel, some other guy possibly, wrote all this down after the fact so that the Bible seemed a little bit more impressive and legitimate. Basically, after all of these things occurred, they wrote it like it was prophecy, but things had already happened. That is one way that people interpret a text like this. There are certain biblical scholars that do not believe in the supernatural ability of God to utilize men like Daniel to prophesy about things that were yet to come. Another way for you to interpret this is as it is said or stated here. That this, in fact, was information given to Daniel before it happened, because God has the power to do so. Now, you probably know which perspective I have, and it is up to you to figure out what perspective you want to have. So that's, the first parentheses that we're going to open and close. Also, as we continue, as I read, you probably noticed that throughout the text, there are references of two kings or kingdoms, of the north and of the south. And it goes on and on and on, talking about what the north does to the south and what the south does to the north. This map illustrates a little bit of what is happening here. So initially, starting from verse 1 of chapter 11, we have a mention of Darius the Mede. This is very likely something that should have been connected to the previous chapter. And remember, in the previous chapter, the angel was talking to Daniel, and he was basically saying, look, I'm doing all these things. Michael is helping me, and I was also helping this guy named Darius. So that should have been connected to the previous chapter. So on verse 2, then we start this portion, and it says, "And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than them. By his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will." So here there's a reference of 3 Persian kings, and then a 4th comes who is mightier than them all. So that's a reference of the 4th king being very likely Xerxes or Ahasuerus, which is the Hebrew term or the name that is given in the Bible, such as in the book of Esther, okay? So that was the last Persian king of note. When there's a reference of now a mightier king, now likely this is a reference to Alexander the Great, who is very well known. And then it goes on to talk about the fact that after passing, so on verse 4, "And when he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken up and divided towards the 4 winds of heaven, but not among his posterity, nor according to his dominion with which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be uprooted, even for others besides these. In summary, after Alexander the Great's death, no one in his lineage followed in ruling the kingdom. So his kingdom, all the land that he had conquered, basically it was divided up into four. And these four individuals who were, military leaders of his, they were the ones that basically became emperors of these regions. So the map that we see here is of two of those regions that were split up. Why do we only have two? The north and the south are the ones that were most prevalent, most powerful, and for the sake of God's people, most important. The other ones were a little bit to the north west. They were smaller in strength and in significance. So from verse 6 and on, it doesn't really mention the other two separations or divisions of Alexander the Great's kingdom. It only talks about these two more powerful ones, and they are being named the northern one and the southern one. Now, again, there's an obvious reason why it is significant. Can you see in the map what's in between? So in the north, we have Persia. In the south, we have the region of Egypt. And these two, again, they were the most powerful subdivided kingdoms of what was Alexander the Great's empire. And these two fought against each other over and over and over again for 130 plus years. And every time one of them gained a little bit of strength, what else do you think they gained? The Holy Land, Jerusalem, Israel. And then when the other gained more strength, it took that over. So the Holy Land served as sort of a prize, a trophy, and a buffer of sorts. Every time one gained more strength, it took it over, and then the other one tried to counter that by conquering it again, and it went back and forth in history. So this is very likely what is being depicted here. Now, in the narrative, as you saw, it's always mentioning the king of the north and the king of the south. Very likely, this is not an account of just one king. It is an account of a lineage of kings from the north and from the south. So now this is what we're going to do. Everybody got this already? This is why it's the north and the southern kingdom. Next slide. This is your cheat sheet. Now, let me explain. This took a very long time for me to put it together, believe it or not. I know enough about history to get myself in trouble, but this is more or less a summary of what is being covered here. So we have the verses to your left, I guess, from verse 4 to verse 45, although we're going to stop at verse 20. We have the lineage of the kings of the north, and we have the house or the lineage of the kings of the south. So every time I cover a section or a few verses, your job is to look at the cheat sheet so you know who is being referenced, if you care. So again, it's not just one king. It's a succession of kings, and they are interacting with one another. And here, it's being given to us in a very summarized way. But in history, there's a lot more detail as to what actually occurred, and I'll try to refer to that detail every once in a while. You got the idea? You have your cheat sheet. You have the verses. Utilize it as we move on. So now, verse 5, once again, it says, Also, the king of the south shall become strong, as well as one of his princes, and he shall gain power over him and have dominion. So again, from verse 5 and on, now it's just talking about the northern lineage and the southern lineage. But then on verse 6 it says, and at the end of some years they shall join forces, for the daughter of the king of the south shall go to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of her authority, and neither he nor his authority shall stand, but she shall be given up with those who brought her, and with him who begot her, and with him who strengthened her in those times. Okay, so this is where it gets a little Game of Thrones-y. Do you get the reference, Game of Thrones? It was, if you don't, it doesn't matter. But basically it was this show, I think on HBO or whatever, a few years back. And it was all about, sort of this stuff happening, where kingdoms rise and fall, kings and lords that want to take over certain portions of land, and then they're double-crossed, they back and forth. As we know, the northern and the southern kingdom, they really don't get along. Even though initially they were parts of Alexander the Great's empire, now that it's all divided up, they really don't get along, especially these two. So they fight back and forth for a while, but eventually they come to terms with the fact that they can't keep fighting forever. So what do? They come to an accord. They try to make an agreement. How do they try to make an agreement? Well, it states here that the families wanted to unite. So there was a marriage between one of the king's daughters to the other king. Again, it says here, and at the end of some years, they shall join forces, for the daughter of the king of the south shall go to the king of the north. So the daughter of the king of the south, and you should be referencing there verse 5 and 6, the first portion, she marries the king of the north, the same one that is referenced there in those verses. Now, there was an issue. Why was there an issue? Even though there was sort of this peace agreement, and that was going to be ratified by this marriage, the king of the north already had a wife. But again, they wanted to have this agreement. They wanted to, make peace. They wanted to try to, fix the issues that they were having for many years. So the king of the north had to sort of divorce his original wife. And, just kind of put her to the side. They already had a son. So basically, put them to the side so he can marry the daughter of the king of the south. But then what occurs? The king of the south dies. And then the king of the north says, hey, now I don't have any obligation. That king that I hadn't made an agreement with died. So now I feel empowered to go back on this accord. So he basically put to the side, sort of divorced the princess, and went back to his previous wife. All good? Following? But this is where the plot thickens. Now put yourself in the previous wife's shoes. How would you feel about what just occurred? Pretty bad, wouldn't you agree? Well, she felt so bad that she poisoned him. That's how bad she felt. She essentially killed him, and then killed the princess, who was still alive but sort of divorced. Why? Because she wanted her son to become king. So that's where you have the next guy over on 6b. So now the previous king died. Now a new king takes charge, And this whole agreement is broken, and now they're fighting again. And they're at it, even worse than before. Why? Let's look at the next verse. Again, Game of Thrones. From verse 7 on, it says, But from a branch of her roots, one shall arise in his place, who shall come with an army, entering the fortress of the king of the north, and deal with them and prevail. So here's what occurred. From verse 7 to verse 9, the son and the brother of the slayed princess gets really upset. Why? Because again, they just killed his sister. And the other guy, took back his previous wife, but now he is dead already, so now he is dealing with the other person who is in charge. But again, it's between the north and the south, so it doesn't matter who is the king. All that matters is you're the bad guy and we're the good guys, and the other person is saying the same thing. So we're going to go at it. He wants revenge. So he goes, the king, now the current king, on verse 7 to 9, goes and attacks the kingdom of the north. Okay? And then he goes on. And he shall also carry their gods captive to Egypt with their princes and their precious articles of silver and gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. Also the king of the north shall come to the kingdom of the king of the south, but he shall return to his own land. What happened there? So the king of the south goes and attacks the king of the north. He prevails and humiliates him. But then verse 9 states that the king of the north says, hey, I'm a king too. I'm going to try to get back at you. So he goes and tries to attack the southern kingdom, but it does not work out very well. So he has to retreat and is further humiliated. So this is what is happening from verse 7 to verse 9. And again, this is literally happening in history. Google it. Wikipedia, check out your history books. Moving on, verse 10. However, his sons shall stir up strife and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overwhelm and pass through. Then he shall return to his fortress and stir up strife. So here what happens is one of the sons of the king of the north goes and says, okay, you guys beat up my dad. You humiliated him. Now he's not in charge anymore. Now I'm in charge. So what am I going to do? I'm going to attack you back. So that's verse 10, and that's the next king who's going to stick around until verse 18 to 19. So he is now the main character of the kingdom of the north. Even though the kingdom of the south is mentioned, he is the one that is being focused on for all of these verses. His name is Antiochus III, the Great, right? So he says, and why is he the Great? Because again, he was able to counterattack, and when he did counterattack, every single time they're going back and forth, what is happening? Remember what I showed you in the map? What did I show you in the map? What is the trophy? Jerusalem. Every single time one attacks and is successful, they take it over. And then the other does that and take it over. And it's going from hand to hand to hand. Now let's just pause here for a second. Have you seen pictures of Jerusalem? Some of you have been there. It's just a little desert the size of New Jersey. If you look at it, there's not much to it. There's nothing really there that you can just gaze at and see any value. However, seemingly, for all of history, people have looked at that as its most prized possession. Again, kingdoms rise and fall throughout history by trying to conquer it over and over and over again till this day. That is significant. Why? The reason why Daniel was receiving these visions, initially it was because he was kind of distraught about all the strife that his people were going to go through. And now the angel is explaining, boy, you don't even know what's coming. If you think you're upset about these last 70 years in Babylon, I got something coming for you. Because this stuff is going to continue to happen over and over and over again. And it will seem like an endless fight, a tug of war, and you guys will always be in the middle. So again, I don't mean to give you bad news, Daniel, but this is not going to end. This is not going to cease. So again, now the south, so the north gains control on verse 10. And then, as you would expect, what do you expect that is going to happen on verse 11 to 12? Now the south is going to try to do the same thing. And it's going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So from 11 to 12. And the king of the south shall be moved with rage and go out and fight with him with the king of the north, who shall muster a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into the hand of his enemy. When he has taken away the multitude, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cast down tens of thousands, but he will not prevail. So again, there's this tug of war, back and forth, back and forth. The south regains control of the Holy Land, but only temporarily. Why is it temporarily? Because then on verse 13 to 16, you have the north now in control, and now it's trying to not only solidify its position. So on verse 13 to 16, now the north is the one that is in charge, and is trying to further solidify its position as the main power, and because it wants to stay there forever. So how does it try to do that? Verse 13, it states, "For the king of the north will return and muster a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come at the end of some years with a great army and much equipment. Now, in those times, many shall rise up against the king of the south, also violent men of your people shall exalt themselves in fulfillment of the vision that they shall fall. So the king of the north shall come and build a siege mound and take a fortified city, and forces of the south shall not withstand him. Even his choice troops shall have no strength to resist. But he who comes against him shall do according to his own with, and no one shall stand against him. He shall stand in his glorious land." An interesting thing happened from verse 13 to verse 16, more or less. Basically, the Jews were tired of the ping pong, going back and forth, back and forth. So for the first time, they took sides, and they actually chose to be reigned over by the northern kingdom. And oh boy, did they regret that choice. Now, to be fair, it was a choice between one of two lesser evils. There wasn't a third option, but again, they sided with the northern kingdom, and because of that, they suffered even to a greater degree, because the person who was in charge really, really was, for lack of a better way to explain it, a total creep. So they suffered on the hands of that particular king. From verse 17 on, there's sort of a ploy here. So the north tries to take advantage of this regained control that it has, And it states here, he shall also set his face to enter with strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do. And he shall give him a daughter, a woman to destroy it, but she shall not stand with him or be for him. So this is what's happening. The northern kingdom is now in charge. It wants to solidify its position as the power. And how does it try to do that? By giving one of its princes to marry the king of the south. Her name was Cleopatra, not the one that you're thinking of. That Cleopatra came 100 years later or so. But there is a lineage there now that is established. Why? His ploy was to sort of send her as a spy of sorts, right? Because it's his daughter. But once she got to the south, became the queen or their princess, she actually sided with the south and didn't do what her father wanted her to do, which is the reference here that it states, but she shall not stand with him or be for him. So basically, she negated this affiliation that she had with her dad and sided with her husband. So now she is for the south, even though she came from the north. And again, 100 years later, you have this sort of lineage of the Cleopatra that all of us are familiar with. Eventually, the kingdom of the north pivots. So this whole idea of giving the princes away and trying to solidify its position, it didn't work. So how does it try to do that and again remain in power? It states here on verse 18, after this he shall turn his face to the coastlands and shall take many, but a ruler shall bring the reproach against them to an end, and with the reproach removed, he shall turn on him. Then he shall turn his face towards the fortress of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found. So it tried to conquer certain lands in the coast, but it was not successful, to the point where he had to retreat, and he lost a lot of men, he lost a lot of power. And when he retreated back to his fortress, he died. So that was the end of that particular king that ended on verse 18 and 19. Now on verse 20 it states, there shall arise in his place one who imposes taxes on the glorious kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, but not in anger or in battle. So this next king takes over. And because his father, his predecessor, did so much damage to the kingdom by losing all of these battles later on in his reign, that the kingdom was basically in debt. So it tried to attain resources through taxes, even taxing the people of God, the Jews, to no avail. And he died, instantaneously almost, reigned a very small portion of time. And then this next king over that you have from verse 21 to 45 is the focus of the remaining of the chapter. And the angel, as he is talking to Daniel, makes this linkage between this Antiochus the fourth and the Antichrist. And there's going to be a anti-type relationship regarding what he did in our past and in their future, and what's going to happen in all of our future regarding who the Antichrist will be and the atrocities that will happen because of his dominion on earth. Clap, please. We've covered the text. This is my job. I have to do it. And I told you, it's not a text that is suitable for a typical sermon, yet we have to cover it, right? We have to be knowledgeable of what is in front of us. We can't just skip it. But now that we've covered, there's a principle here. There is a lesson outside of history, outside of these names, outside of the rises and fallings of kings and kingdoms. What is the lesson? The lesson is actually contained and summarized in Proverbs 21:1. Here's what it says, Proverbs 21:1. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. Like the rivers of water, he turns it wherever he wishes. Let me read that again. Proverbs 21:1. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. Like the rivers of water, he turns it wherever he wishes. Proverbs 21:1 basically states that God is the one in charge. Even though we have earthly rulers, at that time kings, this time we still have certain monarchies, but mostly, prime ministers and presidents of sorts, right? Governors, you name it. Even though we have earthly authorities, God is the ultimate authority. To the point where God has the heart of these kings in his hands. And much like a river, God can make them go to the left, to the right, straight, maybe up and down, I don't know. But God has this power. God has this authority. Why is this important? People sometimes claim, especially when we're talking about prophecies, especially when we're talking about predestination, that sort of stuff, that all God does is view the future. And that's why these things are contained in the Bible, because God has this power to see into the future. But there's a problem with that. What's the problem? We not only see God telling what is going to happen in the future, we also see God acting. He is active. Now, any of you who has ever watched a movie that has anything to do with the future, let's say Back to the Future. What happens when you go into the future or the past and you act out? What happens thereafter? The butterfly effect, right? Because you're not supposed to mess with it. What does God do? He messes with it all the time. He's always messing with it. Every single time, God is putting somebody, taking something away, doing something. He literally is messing with history. So God cannot be only explained by someone who just sees the future, and that's why he knows what's happening. He's actually active. He's interacting with the future, and as the future is unfolding, God is doing his thing. So not only does he have the ability to foresee, he also has the power to do and the authority to do whatever he pleases. Why is this important? In a smaller scale, we have challenges in relationships. Wouldn't you agree? Wouldn't you agree? Relationships are tough. Relationship with kids are tough. Relationship with parents are tough. Relationship with spouses are tough. Relationship with extended family, relationship with friends, relationship with bosses. Do you know why they're tough? Because we can't literally make people do what we want them to do. Eventually, they're going to do what they want to do. And every once in a while, you know from practice, from experience, that what they want to do is bad and is wrong. Wouldn't you agree? Whether we're talking about parents, or we're talking about kids, or we're talking about spouses, or we're talking about friends, or we're talking about bosses, or we're talking about extended family, you've tried and you tried and you tried to talk them out of a bad decision or a bad posture or a bad lifestyle, but you can't. Why? Because they have power over themselves and you don't have that power. This is when you rely upon Proverbs 21:1. What should be your posture? Your posture should be, God, I've tried and I failed miserably. Go get him. Go get him. Aren't you the God that has the king's heart in your hand? Much less him or her. If we believe that God has the power to literally mess with history, whoever that person is should not be a problem. And that's the God that we believe in. We believe in the God that has the power to have the king's heart in his hand, and like a river, will turn wherever he wishes and pleases. So whenever we are in a situation where there is some, desire to change someone's heart, give it up. Talk to God and tell God, go get him. Go get her. We know you have the power to do so. And if it is, in fact, something that you wish that is beneficial, we have faith and we have the hope that you will do so because you are God. Amen.